Miss Monroe, it's time!
How'd you get your start?
What start?
In movies.
I guess I was discovered. I know you're supposed to get used to it. I played Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe. I can't face doing another scene with Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn doesn't exist. When I come out of my dressing room, I'm Norma Jean. I'm still her when the camera's rolling. Marilyn Monroe only exists on the screen.
Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is based on a powerful Hollywood movie story, explained in a simple and interesting way. This is not just a movie recap, it's a journey through emotions, struggle, and unforgettable moments. So relax, stay till the end, and enjoy this amazing story. Blonde, 2012, Movie Review. Blonde is a 2022 American psychological drama film written and directed by Dominik, based on the 2000 novel by Joyce Carol Oates. The film is a fictionalized account of the life and career of American actress Marilyn Monroe, played by Ana de Armas. The cast also includes Adrien Brody, Bobby Cannavale, Xavier Samuel, and Julianne Nicholson. Dede Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, Tracy Landon, Brad Pitt, and Scott Robertson produced the film. After a lengthy period of development that began in 2010, Blonde entered production in August 2019 in Los Angeles. Production wrapped in July 2021, following the shutdowns caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The film plays with shifting aspect ratios and alternates between color and black and white. Blonde premiered at the 79th Venice International Film Festival on September 8, 2022, where it received a 14-minute standing ovation. It began a limited theatrical release in the US on September 16, before its streaming release on September 28 by Netflix. It is the first NC-17 rated film to be released exclusively to a streaming service. The film received mixed reviews from critics and audiences. While de Armas's performance garnered praise, the fictionalization of Monroe's life was considered exploitative and the screenplay was criticized. Blonde received 8 nominations at the 43rd Golden Raspberry Awards, winning Worst Picture and Worst Screenplay, while de Armas was nominated for the Academy Award, Golden Globe Award, BAFTA Award, and SAG Award for Best Actress. 6-year-old Norma Jean Mortensen is raised by her mentally unstable mother, Gladys Pearl Baker. On her 7th birthday in 1933, Norma Jean is given a framed picture of a man which Gladys claims was her father. Later that night, a fire breaks out in Hollywood Hills. Gladys attempts to drive Norma Jean up there, saying that her friend, who owns a fireproof mansion, lives there. However, she is forced to return at the police's orders. Norma asks her mother why her father left them, which enraged Gladys, who starts to cry, shout, and hit Norma. Back home, Gladys runs a bath and forces Norma to get in, despite her protests that it's too hot. While giving Norma Jean a bath, an enraged Gladys tries to drown her. Norma Jean flees to the house of her neighbor, Miss Flynn, who promises she will be fine. Days later, Norma Jean is sent to an orphanage while Gladys is admitted to a mental hospital, having been declared unfit to raise a child. In the 1940s, Norma Jean has become a pin-up model under the stage name Marilyn Monroe, featuring on magazine covers and calendars. While trying to get a break into the acting world, she is raped by film studio president Mr. Z. In 1951, she auditions for the role of Nell in Don't Bother to Knock. The audition goes awry when she breaks down and leaves in tears, but impresses the casting director enough to give her the part. As her career steadily rises, she meets Charles Cass Chaplin Jr. and Edward G. Eddie Robinson Jr., and becomes a lover to both. Norma Jean lands her breakout role in 1953 with Niagara, but after she is spotted in public with Cass and Eddie, her agent requests that she limit her appearances with them in public, which upsets her as she feels that her Marilyn persona is just a role and not her real self. Norma Jean becomes pregnant by Cass, much to her delight, but decides to get an abortion out of fear of the child possibly inheriting her mother's mental issues. Cass supports her decision. On the day of the appointment, she changes her mind, but her pleas to cancel the appointment are ignored. After, she breaks things off with Cass and Eddie. She later meets Joe DiMaggio, a retired baseball star who sympathizes with her when she expresses her desire to leave Hollywood and become a more serious actress in NYC. As Norma Jean begins Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she receives a letter from a man claiming to be her father. She feels disconnected from her on-screen performance at the film's premiere, saying it is not her. She returns to her hotel room, having been told that someone is waiting for her. Expecting it to be her father, she instead finds DiMaggio, who proposes to her, which she accepts reluctantly. Norma Jean and Joe's marriage sours when Cass and Eddie give Joe some nude publicity photographs of her, which enrages him so much that he hits Norma Jean and demands that she stop making the 7-year itch. She goes through with filming nonetheless, doing the famous stunt with the white dress. When she arrives home, a drunken Joe screams at her and gets more physically violent. She divorces him shortly after. In 1955, Norma Jean auditions for the Broadway play Magda by renowned playwright Arthur Miller. During a read-through, her performance impresses everyone except Miller, but he eventually warms up to her when she gives him some insightful character analysis. Norma Jean and Arthur marry and move to Maine, where she lives a happy life with him and becomes pregnant again. However, when walking on the beach one day with a platter of food, she falls and miscarries. Distraught, she returns to acting. While filming Some Like It Hot, Norma Jean becomes more uncontrollable and mentally disturbed, overwhelmed by the constant press attention, feels that she is becoming a joke, has frequent outbursts on set, especially towards director Billy Wilder, and grows increasingly distant from Arthur. To cope with her stress, she begins taking pills. By 1962, she has become dependent on drugs and alcohol. Secret Service agents pick up an intoxicated Norma Jean and take her to a hotel to meet President John F. Kennedy, who rapes her and then has her taken away after she vomits in his bed. Already dazed and drugged, Norma Jean begins to wonder if this is what being Marilyn Monroe has led to, and she also hallucinates having another abortion before being sent back to her home in LA. She learns from Eddie on the phone that Cass has died and left her something, which she initially refuses to see but is convinced to accept by Eddie, who sends it in a package in the mail. It turns out to be the stuffed tiger she had found when the three of them were together, and the package also contains a letter from Cass, where he confesses that the letters Norma Jean has been receiving, supposedly from her father, were actually written by him. Shattered by the revelation, Norma Jean overdoses on barbiturates. As she lies dying on her bed, she has a vision of her father welcoming her to the afterlife. As early as 2010, director and screenwriter Andrew Dominik began developing the project, which is an adaptation of the novel Blonde, 2000, a fictional and controversial account of Monroe's life and a Pulitzer Prize finalist by Joyce Carol Oates. Dominik said that he read several of Monroe's biographies but that he used very little of this research in the film, adding that Oates' novel was pretty much the Bible for the film. Dominik told Vulture that Blonde is a film that definitely has a morality about it. But it swims in very ambiguous waters because I don't think it will be as cut and dried as people want to see it. There's something in it to offend everyone. Dominik discussed his fascination with Marilyn Monroe, stating, "Why is Marilyn Monroe the great female icon of the 20th century? For men she is an object of sexual desire that is desperately in need of rescue. For women, she embodies all the injustices visited upon the feminine, a sister, a Cinderella, consigned to live among the ashes. I want to tell the story of Norma Jean Sick as a central figure in a fairy tale, an orphan child lost in the woods of Hollywood, being consumed by that great icon of the 20th century." Dominik described the film as being more accessible than his previous projects and revealed that his script contained very little dialogue, as he preferred to make it more of an avalanche of images and events. Furthermore, Dominik stated, "It tells the story of how a childhood trauma shapes an adult who's split between a public and a private self. It's basically the story of every human being, but it's using a certain sense of association that we have with something very familiar, just through media exposure. It takes all of those things and turns the meanings of them inside out, according to how she feels, which is basically how we live. It's how we all operate in the world. It just seems to me to be very resonant. I think the project has got a lot of really exciting possibilities, in terms of what can be done, cinematically." For Dominik, Blonde was his first attempt at developing a film featuring a woman at the center of the story. During a retrospective screening of his Oscar-nominated western The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2007, Dominik stated, "It's a different thing for me to do. The main character is female. My films are fairly bereft of women and now I'm imagining what it's like to be one." While Netflix classified Blonde as a fictional portrait of Marilyn Monroe on the platform's official website, Dominik stated, "I think Blonde is a work of fiction and it's got just as much Joyce in it as it does Marilyn. But having said that, I think it's probably closer to the truth than what Fox is pushing to sell Marilyn stuff." In May 2010, it was announced that Naomi Watts would star in the film as Monroe, and that the production, which at this point cost an estimated $20 million, was slated to begin principal photography in January 2011. Principal photography on the film did not commence, with Dominik later stating he hoped it would be his next film, with production commencing in 2013. During this time, Dominik directed the crime drama Killing Them Softly, 2012, starring Brad Pitt, who subsequently became interested in the project. In June 2012, it was announced Plan B Entertainment would produce the film, with Pitt, Dede, Gardner, and Jeremy Kleiner serving as producers, but Watts' participation was in question, as it's likely that the filmmakers would go in a different direction, according to the report. In April 2014, it was announced that Jessica Chastain had replaced Watts as Monroe. Chastain had co-starred in Terrence Malick's drama The Tree of Life, 2011, opposite Pitt, who was instrumental in her casting. The report also revealed that Dominik was planning to begin principal photography in August of that year. Dominik attributed the delays in production partly due to financing. "It's just a question of how much money I can get to make the film. And I really want to make that movie. I've been working on it for years." In August 2016, it was announced that Netflix would distribute the film. In March 2019, it was announced that Ana de Armas was in early negotiations to star in the film, replacing Chastain. Dominik noticed de Armas's performance in Knock Knock, and while she went through a long casting process, Dominik secured her the role after the first audition. In preparation, de Armas worked with a dialect coach for a year. De Armas described her casting process, "I only had to audition for Marilyn once and Andrew said it's you, but I had to audition for everyone else, the producers, the money people. I always have people I needed to convince. But I knew I could do it." Playing Marilyn was groundbreaking. A Cuban playing Marilyn Monroe. "I wanted it so badly. You see that famous photo of her and she is smiling in the moment, but that's just a slice of what she was really going through at the time. De Armas considered her relationship with Dominik to be the most collaborative of her career, remarking, "Yes, I have had collaborative relationships, but to get phone calls at midnight because he has an idea and he can't sleep and all of a sudden you can't sleep for the same reason." De Armas read Oates' novel and also said she studied hundreds of photographs, videos, audio recordings, and films. In August 2019, it was announced that Adrien Brody, Bobby Cannavale, Julianne Nicholson, Casper Philipson, Sarah Paxton, and Xavier Samuel joined the cast, followed by Garrett Dillahunt, Scoot McNairy, Lucy DeVito, Michael Massini, Spencer Garrett, Chris Lemmon, Rebecca Wysocki, Ned Bellamy, and Dan Butler in September 2019. Vanessa Lemonides provided Monroe's singing voice in the film. Principal photography began in Los Angeles in August 2019. In April 2022, Dominik confirmed that the filming was finished in July 2021, following the shutdowns as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, and that post-production had also been finished. During Blonde's press conference at the 79th Venice Film Festival, Dominik said that the initial scenes of the film were shot in the same apartment where Monroe had lived with her mother. Monroe's death scene was also filmed in the same room where she died in real life. It definitely took on elements of being like a seance, Dominik said. Filming also started on August 4, 2019, the 57th anniversary of Monroe's death. De Armas said at the press conference that she believes Monroe's ghost was close to them on set. "I think she was happy. She would also throw things off the wall sometimes and get mad if she didn't like something. Maybe this sounds very mystical, but it is true. We all felt it." De Armas later told another magazine that everyone in the crew wrote a message to Monroe in a big card, then they went to the cemetery and put it on her grave. "We were asking for permission in a way. Everyone felt a huge responsibility, and we were very aware of the side of the story we were going to tell, the story of Norma Jean, the person behind this character, Marilyn Monroe. Who was she really?" she said. Much of Blonde's cinematography is digitally shot in black and white, other portions of the film are in color, aspect ratios, 1:1, 1.37:1, 1.85:1, 2.39:1 shift to depict historical usage. Many scenes are visual homages to classic photographs of Monroe by notable photographers. Blonde was set to premiere at 2021 Venice Film Festival, but Netflix was unhappy with the final cut it received, and hired Jennifer Lame to help. Real footage from Monroe's filmography is used in this movie, mixed in with scenes recreated by Ana de Armas, who was placed in the films All About Eve, 1950, Don't Bother to Knock, 1952, Niagara, 1953, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, and Some Like It Hot, 1959. 50 Andrew Dominik said that he initially failed to obtain permission from Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer to use footage from their films, so he had to recreate some scenes, such as the scene with De Armas and Tony Curtis in Some Like It Hot, which he shot with an actor playing Curtis in case he couldn't get permission to use the original footage. Dominik was allowed to use the footage after an MGM executive was fired and was replaced by Michael DeLuca, who finally gave him permission to use the film clip. Blonde was controversial among critics and audiences alike and was described as a complicated, highly divisive film. Praise was directed towards De Armas's performance, but the response to the writing and Dominik's depiction of Monroe's life divided critics. Some found the film's spin on the traditional biopic refreshing, while others criticized it as exploitative, sexist, and dehumanizing. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, Blonde holds a rating of 42% based on 318 reviews, with an average of 5.5/10. The site's critics' consensus reads, "Ana de Armas' luminous performance makes it difficult to look away, but Blonde can be hard to watch as it teeters between commenting on exploitation and contributing to it." On Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, the film has a score of 50 out of 100, based on 57 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Reviewing the film following its world premiere at Venice, where it received a 14-minute standing ovation, reducing de Armas to tears, Catherine Bray of Empire praised Dominik's visual style and de Armas' performance, but found the film failed at demystifying Monroe's life, writing, "The portrait that this film paints of Monroe depicts a little girl lost, who repeatedly calls her lover's daddy and reacts to almost every new setback with the same tremulously teary ingenuous pout." Vanity Fair's Richard Lawson found it a fascinating alternative to the traditional biopic, commending the unconventional storytelling, direction, and de Armas' performance. Owen Gleiberman of Variety called de Armas' work a performance of breathtaking shimmer and imagination and candor and heartbreak. Deadline Hollywood's Damon Wise stated the film is an astonishing way to tell Monroe's life in a fictional sense, as it is presented as a horror movie in the surreal, nightmarish style comparable to the films of David Lynch, especially Mulholland Drive, 2001. 11 In a very positive review, IGN Siddhant Adlika called the film a dreamlike fictional biopic about Marilyn Monroe that features a stunning, volatile performance from Ana de Armas, whose daring vulnerability is matched by director Andrew Dominik's equally daring formal approach. David Rooney of The Hollywood Reporter called it a must-see, yet also a work of such wild excesses and questionable cruelty. In GQ, Jack King's review also noted how the film shifts from a traditional biopic to a movie unrelenting in its brutality. The Guardian's Leslie Fulperin described the film as ravishing, moving and intensely irritating but ultimately all a bit much, and assigned it a rating of 3 stars out of 5. In a mixed review for IndieWire, Sophie Monks Kaufman called the film a bizarre, miserablest biopic, admiring de Armas' performance and the cinematography, but criticizing Dominik's portrayal of Monroe. Dominik critiques the world for reducing his subject down to her top-line assets and then treats her in exactly the same way. His Marilyn is a sexy, breathy blonde with daddy issues. And that's all, folks. The New York Times critic Manala Dargis panned the film, criticizing the fact that once again a director is more interested in examining Monroe's body, literally, in this case, than getting inside her mind and writing. Given all the indignities and horrors that Marilyn Monroe endured during her 36 years, it is a relief that she didn't have to suffer through the vulgarities of Blonde, the latest necrophiliac entertainment to exploit her. In his negative review, Justin Chang from the Los Angeles Times stated that the film isn't really about Marilyn Monroe. It's about making her suffer. He also opined that the film turns Marilyn Monroe into an avatar of suffering, dwelling on her pain so obsessively that even the film's fleeting moments of empathy feel like another form of exploitation. At times, the movie feels like a slaughterhouse scene from the animal's point of view, wrote Bill Jeberai in his review for Vulture, remarking on the film's tendency to elicit strong reactions and emotions from an audience by putting together what he described as a captivating and terrifying jigsaw puzzle of Monroe's life. Anthony Lane, in his review for The New Yorker, praised de Armas' performance and Dominik's visual style, but heavily criticized his portrayal of Monroe, ultimately concluding, "Bedazzling, overlong, and unjust, Blonde does a grave disservice to the woman whom it purports to honor." In a negative review for Slant magazine, Jake Cole echoed Lane's sentiment, stating, "Blonde is the worst kind of feminism, one so absorbed in the desire to save a woman that it victimizes her as much as possible to make its redemption of her that much more praiseworthy." Writing for Time, Stephanie Zacharek criticized Dominik for allowing no room for the real-life Marilyn's multidimensionality, asserting that Marilyn, the brilliant, perceptive if often difficult performer, is almost nowhere to be seen in Andrew Dominik's willfully clueless Freudian fantasy Blonde. Jesse Thompson of The Independent gave the film 1 star out of 5, stating, "Blonde is not a bad film because it is degrading, exploitative and misogynist, even though it is all of those things. It's bad because it's boring, pleased with itself and doesn't have a clue what it's trying to say." Joyce Carol Oates, the author of the novel on which the film is based, observed a rough cut of the film, and publicly stated, I have seen the rough cut of Andrew Dominik's adaptation and it is startling, brilliant, very disturbing and perhaps most surprisingly an utterly feminist interpretation, not sure that any male director has ever achieved anything like this. Spanish director Pedro Almodóvar called Blonde a great film and praised Ana de Armas for portraying Monroe in a chillingly real way. He later argued that de Armas deserved to win the Best Actress Oscar for her performance. Actress Jamie Lee Curtis, who starred opposite Ana de Armas in Knives Out, 2019, and whose father, Tony Curtis, starred opposite Monroe in Some Like It Hot, 1959, and is featured in Blonde, was impressed with de Armas' performance. After also seeing an early cut, I dropped to the floor. I couldn't believe it. Ana was completely gone. She was Marilyn. Brad Pitt, who co-produced the film via his Plan B banner, praised de Armas' performance, saying she is phenomenal in it. That's a tough dress to fill. It was 10 years in the making. It wasn't until we found Ana that we could get it across the finish line. Actor Casey Affleck also praised the film, stating, "I've seen a couple of versions of Blonde and it's taken him, Dominik, a long time to get it out into the world. But that's just how he is. He's so slow with it. And it's an amazing, beautiful film." Susie Kennedy, an English Marilyn Monroe impersonator and historian for over 20 years, openly despised the film, calling it a terrible movie, an absolute assassination of Marilyn Monroe's legacy, an assassination of an icon, and that it capitalized on and exploited the deep sadness of Marilyn's life. Upon the trailer's release, de Armas' casting as Monroe received some backlash as some viewers felt her ethnic background did not entirely match Monroe's, with complaints that she still maintained her native Cuban accent. Regarding her accent, Dominik told Screen Daily in February 2022 that there was work involved in making the actress sound American. Monroe's official estate defended de Armas' casting, stating, "Marilyn Monroe is a singular Hollywood and pop culture icon that transcends generations and history. Any actor that steps into that role knows they have big shoes to fill." Based on the trailer alone, it looks like Ana was a great casting choice as she captures Marilyn's glamour, humanity, and vulnerability. We can't wait to see the film in its entirety. Blonde sparked some controversy when its NC-17 rating, meaning adults only, was confirmed, raising concerns that it would be exploitative in its depiction of Monroe. The film itself features graphic scenes of sexual abuse, including a rape scene as well as Monroe having an abortion 101 and a miscarriage. 11 writing for Jezebel, Caddy Ruth Ashcroft remarked on how the rating's relationship with Monroe's enduring status as a sex symbol in pop culture prevents the film from achieving its goal of humanizing her, concluding, "Blonde's NC-17 rating is intended as both a warning and restriction as to who can handle the film's mature content. It also acts like a tease just how scandalous was the sexbot's life anyways, in a way that may prevent the movie from shrinking Monroe the myth back down to Norma Jean sick. Speaking on the rating in an interview with Screen Daily, Andrew Dominik stated, "It's a demanding movie, it is what it is, it says what it says. And if the audience doesn't like it, that's the fucking audience's problem. It's not running for public office," adding, "If I look at an episode of Euphoria, it's far more graphic than anything going on in Blonde." In an interview with fashion magazine L'Officiel Italia, de Armas echoed the sentiment, saying, "I don't understand why it happened. I can cite a number of programs or movies that are much more explicit and with a lot more sexual content than Blonde. But to tell this story it's important to show all those moments in Marilyn's life that brought her to the end she did. It needs to be explained. In the cast everyone knew we should delve into unpleasant territory, it wasn't just up to me." Delving into what Dominik's vision for the film was, de Armas told Rotten Tomatoes, "Andrew's ambitions were very clear from the start to present a version of Marilyn Monroe's life through her lens. He wanted the world to experience what it actually felt like to not only be Marilyn, but also Norma Jean. I found that to be the most daring, unapologetic, and feminist take on her story that I had ever seen." She added, Our movie is not linear or conventional, it is meant to be a sensorial and emotional experience. The film moves along with her feelings and her experiences. There are moments when we are inside of her body and mind, and this will give the audience an opportunity to experience what it was like to be Norma and Marilyn at the same time. In a piece for GQ, Keith Phipps argues that Blonde, being an exception from the commercial stigma of having an NC-17 rating due to its exclusive release on a streaming platform, could usher in a new era of films and filmmakers that will push beyond the restrictions of the R rating. Writing, in theory, the NC-17 rating could thrive on services like Netflix, Hulu, and HBO Max, and Blonde could be a sign of things to come, possibly serving as a cue for other filmmakers to push beyond the restrictions of the R rating. Writing for IndieWire, Samantha Bergeson claimed the film makes an anti-abortion statement by showing a CGI fetus talking to Monroe. Charles Poliamore wrote for The Verge that Blonde's CGI fetus is anti-abortion propaganda dressed up as art, and called it a judgmental CGI fetus who sometimes talks to Marilyn Monroe from within her uterus to shame her for having had an abortion in the past. A sentiment shared by abortion rights activists such as Karen Spruish, National Director of Arts and Entertainment Engagement at the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, who called it medically inaccurate descriptions of fetuses and pregnancy in a statement to the Washington Post. Steph Harold, who researches reproductive health at the University of California at San Francisco and studies abortion depiction in films and television shows, said the scene in which Monroe's character speaks to the fetus totally infantilized her in ways that I've only seen in anti-abortion propaganda-type movies. Harold said, "I was pretty shocked by it, especially given the platform and the mainstream quality of this movie." Planned Parenthood accused the film of delivering an anti-abortion message about Monroe's abortion, releasing the following statement to The Hollywood Reporter saying the film was rooted in anti-abortion propaganda. As film and TV shapes many people's understanding of sexual and reproductive health, it's critical these depictions accurately portray women's real decisions and experiences. While abortion is safe, essential health care, anti-abortion zealots have long contributed to abortion stigma by using medically inaccurate descriptions of fetuses and pregnancy. Andrew Dominik's new film, Blonde, bolsters their message with a CGI talking fetus, depicted to look like a fully formed baby. There is no evidence that Monroe ever had an abortion, much less forced procedures as it was portrayed in the movie, according to historian Michelle Vogel, author of Marilyn Monroe, Her Films, Her Life. 110 Any talk of pregnancy termination is an assumption on our part. Marilyn loved children and she was desperate to be a mother. Sadly, she never carried a baby to term. It is well documented that Monroe suffered 3 miscarriages during her marriage to Arthur Miller, in 1956, in 1957, and again in 1958. 110 In the 1993 biography Marilyn Monroe, the biography written by Donald Spoto, Monroe's gynecologist, Dr. Leon Crone, stated, "The rumors of her multiple abortions are ridiculous. She never had even one. I don't think the movie is anti-pro-choice. I don't think it is at all. And I'm not convinced that she actually wants to have a baby. I think she has feelings about not having a baby, but I'm not convinced that what she's doing, I mean, she doesn't end up having one. There's a wish for baby but there's a fear of baby, and I think that's kind of the central stressor on her." 107. Blonde abuses and exploits Marilyn Monroe all over again, the way so many men did over the cultural icon's tragic, too short life. Maybe that's the point, but it creates a maddening paradox, condemning the cruelty the superstar endured until her death at 36 while also reveling in it. And yet writer/director Andrew Dominik's film, based on the fictional novel by Joyce Carol Oates, remains technically impeccable throughout, even though it feels like an overlong odyssey at nearly 3 hours. The craftsmanship on display presents another conundrum. Blonde is riveting, even mesmerizing, but eventually you'll want to turn your eyes away as this lurid display becomes just too much. My personal breaking point was a POV shot from inside Marilyn's vagina as she was having a forced abortion performed on her. A lengthy, extreme close-up of a drugged-up Monroe fellating President Kennedy while he's on the phone in a hotel room also feels gratuitous and is probably why the film has earned a rare NC-17 rating. Did any of this really happen? Maybe. Maybe not. What you have to understand from the start is that Blonde is an exploration of the idea of Marilyn Monroe. It's as much a biopic of the film star as Elvis is a biopic of Elvis Presley. It touches on a series of actual, factual events as a road map, from her movies to her marriages. But ultimately, it's a fantasia of fame, which increasingly becomes a hellscape. That's more exciting than the typical biography that plays the greatest hits of a celebrity's life in formulaic fashion, and Blonde is consistently inventive as it toys with both tone and form. By the end, though, this approach feels overwhelming and even a little dreary. As Marilyn Monroe, or her real name of Norma Jean, as she's mostly called in the film, Ana de Armas is asked to cry. A lot. Sometimes it's a light tear or two as she draws from her traumatic childhood for an acting class exercise. Usually, it's heaving sobs as the cumulative weight of mental illness and addiction takes its toll. When she's not crying, she's naked. Frequently, she's both, as well as bloody. And in nearly every situation, she's either a pawn or a victim, a fragile angel searching for a father figure to love and protect her. Certainly, some of this is accurate, the way Hollywood power brokers regarded her as a pretty face and a great ass when she wanted them to consider her a serious actress and love her for her soul. De Armas gives it her all in every moment. She's so captivating, so startling, that you long for the part to provide her the opportunity to show more of Marilyn's depth, to dig deeper than the familiar cliches. She's doing the breathy, girlish voice, but not perfectly. Traces of her Cuban accent are unmistakable, and that's okay given the film's unorthodox approach. More importantly, she captures Monroe's spirit, and often looks uncannily like her. Following standout supporting turns in movies like Knives Out and No Time to Die, as well as the delicious trash that was Deep Water, here is finally the meaty, leading role that showcases all she can do. She's so good that she makes you wish the role rose to her level. Blonde is a fever dream from the very start. Working with cinematographer Joss Whedon, Black KK Klansman, Beyoncé's Lemonade, and frequent musical collaborators Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, Dominik sets the scene with impressionistic wisps of sight and sound. Shadows and ethereal snippets of score mix with ash from a fire in the Hollywood Hills blowing through the night sky. The phone rings loudly. The camera swish pans to the left. We're immediately on edge. It's Los Angeles 1933, and young Norma Jean, a poised and heartbreaking Lily Fisher, is enduring horrific physical and emotional abuse from her volatile and hyperverbal mother, a haunting Julianne Nicholson, always great. Dominik, the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, proclaims his restless style from the beginning, jumping around not just in time, but from high contrast black and white to rich technicolor and in between various aspect ratios. Sometimes, the color palette is faded, as if we're looking at Marilyn in a long ago photograph. Sometimes, the sound design is muted, as in her classic performance of I Wanna Be Loved by You from Some Like It Hot, to indicate the confusion of her inner state. It's all thrilling for a while, and de Armas strikes a magnetic figure as the young Marilyn in both her vulnerability and her ambition. An imagined three-way romance with Charlie Chaplin Jr., Xavier Samuel, and Edward G. Robinson Jr. Evan Williams brings a welcome vibe of fun and frolic. They're both beautiful and flirtatious, smoldering and seductive. And it becomes clear as the movie progresses that they're the only men who loved her for her true self as Norma Jean, while also appreciating the beguiling artifice of Marilyn. This relationship also teaches Norma Jean to lose herself in the mirror in order to find the famous persona she'll present to the outside world. There she is, your magic friend, Cass Chaplin purrs as he caresses her from behind. And Dominik will return to that image of Norma Jean beseeching her own reflection as a means of conjuring strength. The character's stark duality gives de Armas plenty of room to show off her impressive range and precise technique. But too much of Blonde is about men chewing Marilyn up and spitting her back out. A studio executive known only as Mr. Z, presumably as in Zanuck, rapes her when she visits his office about a part. New York Yankees legend Joe DiMaggio, Bobby Cannavale, seems like a decent and tender husband until he turns controlling and violent. Her next husband, playwright Arthur Miller, an understated Adrien Brody, is patient and kind yet emotionally detached, but by the time Marilyn is married to him, anxiety, booze and pills have wrecked her so significantly that no one could have helped. She calls these men daddy in the hope that they'll function in place of the father she never knew but desperately craved, but in the end, everyone lets her down. And Blonde does, too, as it strands de Armas in a third-act sea of hysteria. As for the film's many graphic moments, including one from the perspective of an airplane toilet, as if Marilyn is puking up pills and champagne directly on us, one wonders what the point is. Merely to shock? To show the extent to which the Hollywood machinery commodified her? That's nothing new. Blonde is actually more powerful in its gentler interludes when Marilyn and Arthur Miller are teasingly chasing each other on the beach, for example, hugging and kissing in the golden, shimmering sunlight. "Am I your good girl, Daddy?" she asks him sweetly, seeking his approval. But of course, she can't be happy here, either. All her joyous times are tinged with sadness because we know how this story ends. More often, Dominik seems interested in scenes like the garish slow motion of the Some Like It Hot premiere, where hordes of ravenous men line the sidewalks for Marilyn's arrival, frantically chanting her name, their eyes and mouths distorted to giant, frightening effect as if they wish to devour her whole. He similarly lingers in his depiction of the famous subway great moment from The 7-Year Itch, with Marilyn's ivory halter dress billowing up around her as she giggles and smiles for the crowds and cameras. The costume design from Jennifer Johnson is spectacularly on point throughout, from her famous gowns to simple sweaters and capri pants. We see it in black and white and color, in slow motion and regular speed, from every imaginable angle, over and over again. After a while, it becomes so repetitive that this iconic, pop culture moment grows numbing, and we grow weary of the spectacle. Maybe that's Dominik's point after all. But we shouldn't be. I couldn't help noticing this quote from Joyce Carol Oates, the author of the novel writer/director Andrew Dominik's Blonde is based on. I intended it to be a novella, somewhere around 175 pages, and the last words would have been Marilyn Monroe. But over time, I got so caught up in her world that I couldn't stop there. The final result was this book. The first draft was, originally, longer than the version that was finally published. Some sections were shortened while others had to be surgically removed from the book. While I have not read this novel telling a fictionalized version of Marilyn Monroe's life, I can say Andrew Dominik has more or less done the same thing with Blonde. The film suffers from this approach, especially by the third hour, where the abusive relationships, rape, troubled production shoots, more rape, conspiracy theory indulging, barbiturate misuse, and some more rape before a gut punch ending wrapping together the film's daddy issues framing device has long stopped feeling like a harrowing, pull no punches extreme behind the curtain look at a tragic private life with weighty sadness and emotional to connect, but has cliff dived into what's the greater point: repetitiveness. It's also possible that Andrew Dominik has distilled what sounds like a messy novel into the best possible version of itself as a cinematic adaptation. Without Ana de Armas as Norma Jean Mortensen/Marilyn Monroe, a remarkable talent daring and brave enough to ride the same relentlessly punishing wavelength as Andrew Dominik, and one that has similarly risen to superstardom through no shortage of on-screen sexual objectification, she was guaranteed to rise the Hollywood ranks as soon as she appeared in Eli Roth's twisty and sleazy thriller Knock Knock, seducing and blackmailing Keanu Reeves, here giving arguably the best performance of her career. Blonde would be insufferable. Wandering from one toxic relationship to the next, Ana de Armas sells this never-ending despair for all it's worth, receiving several crying scenes, I lost count for roughly an hour in, and the timing would have been a lot less if the first act wasn't a childhood prologue where Norma Jean is sympathetically played by Lily Fisher, and challenging acting tasks. In one of the film's most devastating bits, a distressed and traumatized Norma Jean gradually pushes that pain back inside, startlingly transforming into an all-smiles Marilyn Monroe, or what the people crave and what she has come to resent. Not only is the above a ridiculously formidable range of expressions for any actor to rotate between on the fly, but it also proves that Andrew Dominik's Blonde could have spared some more time exploring genuinely happy moments in her life, and not just forced smiles. Mostly starting when Marilyn Monroe has achieved a moderate degree of success in Hollywood, there's a short scene tucked between all the aforementioned horrors, perhaps someone forgot to cut it out, and more the amount of fan mail and gifts, such as flowers, are brought up. 2 letters are read, one containing words of praise and the other scathing ridicule, making for a juxtaposition providing some slight humor and a reprieve from bleakness. Another terrific short bit sees Norma arguing a pay disparity between her and her male co-workers. In turn, this also offers Ana de Armas an opportunity to flex emotions beyond sadness. Norma is justifiably angry and doing whatever she can to stand up for herself. That's not to say she could fight back in every unfortunate situation she found herself in, but it would have been nice to see a healthier balance of this intelligence and fight contrasted with the abuse on display. The same goes for the relationships. Surely, a few upbeat interactions existed to toss in, which by doing so, would further flesh out the dynamics and add more substance to the abusive aspects. To Andrew Dominik's credit, he does lend an artful touch to Blonde, even during sequences of uncomfortable sexual coercion and forced abortions that are preceded by awkward CGI fetus shots giving off a gross anti-abortion bent. There is a wide array of aspect ratios and clever usage of black and white photography. More to the point, the photography from Joss Irvin is stellar, granting even the harshest scenes and repetitive beats a distinctive vision, saving it from the tasteless disaster it could have been. As a whole, Blonde comes undone following an estimated 8-year time jump to 1962. Not only is it jarring skipping over so much of Norma Jean's life after spending almost 2 hours in the early 1950s, but the shape of the narrative entirely falls apart. At a certain point, it feels like Andrew Dominik is grabbing into a bag, pulling out pieces of paper with horrific moments written on them to decide what to shoot next. Fortunately, he has terrific work from Ana de Armas in every single one of those scenes. It's also important to note that the supporting cast, including Adrien Brody, Bobby Cannavale, and Xavier Samuel, are all solid as the failed partners, as is Julianne Nicholson portraying Gladys, the unstable institutionalized mother Norma consistently seeks approval from. Many of the characters are not explicitly named, but, for example, it's also relatively simple to figure out who the ex-athlete is meant to be. Each of these relationships is worthy of a full-length movie, which is probably why Blonde feels like it's cutting viewers short by largely only sticking to the nasty parts. However, it is intriguing that each of these partners was older than the next, playing into Norma's desire for love and a father figure. Throughout the film, she reads letters from her dad, who regularly proposes the possibility of finally meeting but is unable to commit. Taking Blonde at face value for the shattering portrait of abuse it taps into, although by no means does it deserve an NC-17 rating, it is tough to write off. Even if the structure loses form and the film goes on for too long, nearly every single scene is compelling for one reason or another, typically a depressing reason. You come away wishing there was more to it, but 3 hours of Ana de Armas turning in phenomenal work deserves a recommendation. Once it's over, it's unlikely one will ever want to watch it again, although it is riveting and difficult to shake. Blonde is directed by Andrew Dominik, it's based on the novel by Joyce Carol Oates. The film stars Ana de Armas, Adrien Brody, Bobby Cannavale, Xavier Samuel, Julianne Nicholson, Lily Fisher, Toby Huss, Casper Philipson, and Dan Butler. This film is not to be confused with the CBS miniseries adaptation of the same name from 2001. The film will have a limited theatrical release on September 16, 2022, with the streaming release on Netflix following on September 28. Norma Jean Baker, who grows up to become famed actress Marilyn Monroe, suffers in her childhood with a mentally unstable abusive mother and her lack of a father. Following being sent to an orphanage, she becomes an iconic starlet, starring in some of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters. But her inner demons behind the scenes, throughout troubled movie shoots, greater ambitions, and drug and alcohol abuse, continue and send her into a downward spiral, which culminates in her death in 1962 at age 36. Is there anyone on the face of the planet who doesn't know who Marilyn Monroe is? She may very well be the most famous movie star of all time, and with her beauty, screen presence, sassy attitude, and intriguing life story, it's not hard to see why. The fact that she's still the subject of many a documentary, biopic, book, article, and everything in between speaks for itself. She was larger than life, as famous as she's ever been even over 60 years after her death. Ana de Armas is given the daunting task of bringing this Hollywood icon to life, while director Andrew Dominik takes on the challenge of doing a female-centric film for the first time in his career. Blonde is a movie that has a lot to live up to, but this critic and fan of old-school Hollywood is happy to say it succeeds, for the most part. Casting is great, the filming and cinematography are fantastic, and it tells a mostly complete story that's gripping and impressive, managing to keep the attention of viewers with its unflinchingly shocking tone. The film got an NC-17 rating from the MPA. It does lag slightly in terms of its overlong running time and a few questionable narrative decisions, and I certainly can't fully speak for its historical accuracy. The film is based on a novel on Monroe that's essentially a fictionalized take on her life, but the film hits more often than it misses. The casting of Ana de Armas was somewhat controversial due to her ethnic descent being different from that of the real Marilyn Monroe, but this young lady manages to impress me in every role she plays. I'm happy to say her portrayal of Ms. Monroe doesn't disappoint. She effectively becomes Marilyn from start to finish. Any doubts you have about her ability to play this iconic starlet from Hollywood's classic era quickly dissipate. Whether she's trying to reconnect with her estranged mother, fighting her inner demons, or falling in love again, de Armas owns this role. Monroe's estate spoke positively of de Armas' casting, and I'm pleased to say I can wholeheartedly agree. The real Marilyn Monroe was a woman with many inner demons, but also one with the ambition to better herself as an actress, and it's well reflected in this film. Hopefully the Academy will stand up and take notice of de Armas' work here. This is Ana de Armas movie, no questions asked, but the supporting cast is nearly as impressive. Highlights of the cast include Bobby Cannavale as Joe DiMaggio, Adrien Brody as Arthur Miller, and Casper Philipson as then-resident John F. Kennedy. He's also portrayed Kennedy in a handful of other movies and TV shows. One true standout in the cast who deserves a special mention is young Lily Fisher, who portrays Monroe as a young girl, dealing with her abusive mother. The innocence, fear, and vulnerability this young lady brings to the role makes for an interesting contrast with the woman Monroe will later become. While the scenes with Fisher don't last too long, she makes an impact. Whether she's inquisitive about her missing father, running nude from a bath in which her mother tried to drown her as she desperately seeks help, or being dropped at an orphanage by the foster parents she thought she could trust, the pain and ordeal suffered by this girl beautifully set the stage for the demons eventually faced by the adult Marilyn Monroe. I loved Fisher's performance in this movie, and truly hope she moves forward to the acting career she deserves, not to mention I admire her for the guts it must have taken for her to accept the challenges a role like this presented. The tone of the movie holds nothing back. As was previously stated, the MPA has given Blonde an NC-17 rating, no doubt due to its subject matter. At no point does this movie attempt to glamorize the life of Marilyn Monroe. While she's a beauty in the public light and loved by many, the behind-the-scenes look at her ordeal is brutally honest. By the time the third act rolls around, she's seldom seen without a drink and pills in her hands. The movie doesn't shield audiences from her sexual escapades and the men who abused her physically and sexually. Blonde hits hard, and it's effective as hell at what it does. Also not to be overlooked is the gorgeous cinematography. Cinematographer Xavier shoots the film primarily in a 4:3 ratio. This typically isn't seen much in modern big screen films anymore. The ratio occasionally shifts when the film or certain shots call for it, and this works surprisingly well. The movie also regularly shifts between color and black and white photography, again depending upon what the scenes in question require. The visual impact of the film is no less effective than its subject matter. A handful of elements in the film don't work. The biggest offender here are CGI scenes of unborn babies shown at the various times Monroe is pregnant. These images are bizarre and feel out of place, looking more like they belong at the end of 2001, A Space Odyssey. Similarly, the overlong running time's necessity is questionable, and the narrative structure can be clumsy at times. Blonde has as much in common with art films as it does biopics, which is simultaneously one of the production's greatest strengths and weaknesses. Blonde is an NC-17 rated journey into the life of one of Hollywood's greatest icons. It's unflinching, brutal, and effective for all it isn't afraid to do. The movie's certainly not going to be for everyone. Prudes, the squeamish, and the easily offended should certainly take their business elsewhere. Minor flaws aside, the movie entertains and impresses. I highly recommend the film, but I won't deny that what's here won't be for everybody. Ana de Armas embodies Marilyn Monroe as something more than sexual. That gets the one major compliment for the trepidatiously buzzy fictionalized biopic out of the way. Aside from that, there is sadly little pointedly good to say of filmmaker Andrew Dominik's aggressively unpleasant adaptation of the acclaimed 2000 novel by Joyce Carol Oates. It took some time to arrive at just why Blonde stands apart from other, more conventional feel-bad stories of abuse, assault, mental breakdown, and toxic fame. While the movie has not incorrectly caught some flack for hypocritically appropriating Marilyn's story, i.e., Norma Jean's story, similarly to how Marilyn herself is appropriated by everyone around her for fun and profit in the story, that can't be what sets Blonde apart. That accusation is far too broad. To varying degrees, it could be leveled upon any Monroe biographer in any media, no matter how well-intentioned the effort may be. This is different. This is an attack. In its impressively lavish and often spot-on visual recreations of the makings of Monroe classics such as Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot, we are party to her well-documented increasing turmoil. In the context of everything else surrounding these scenes, they play as grotesque distortions. The whole of Blonde is a couture, fevered nightmare, and the familiar showbiz bits are no exception. Dominik goes well beyond fly-on-the-wall objectivity, instead implicating us, the viewers, for ever having taken pleasure in those movies. To him, they're nothing but crass exploitation machines, and shame on us for ever enabling them in any way. What this does, ultimately, is gut the very thing that Marilyn was working so hard to bring us, a quality performance, her great presence in what would hopefully be quality films, quite often by top filmmakers such as Billy Wilder and Howard Hawks. Blonde, in its unrelenting barrage of one peak-level tragedy after another, is actively assaulting her legacy films that she so valiantly and difficultly struggled around her pain just long enough to get through, even when the roles weren't what she wanted for herself. Our current moment wherein the veneration of prematurely dead celebrities hinges on their terrible struggles with mental illness far more than their driving struggles to bring what they could to their life and work, see, Robin Williams, poses a probable danger of the opportunistic blonde becoming venerated for all the wrong reasons. I don't think that Joshua Ray, my colleague in the St. Louis Film Critics Association, has gone too far in his letterboxed reaction to Dominik's blonde motives. Jail. Dominik uses Monroe's corpse for his morbid pleasure, and I'm not just saying that because we get not one but two shots from inside her vagina looking out. Shallow, bloated, hollow, arty junk. Poor Ana de Armas. Poor Ana de Armas, indeed. At times, the Cuban actress is a gobsmacked spitting image of the icon. Other times, not quite. But now, she is not only faced with an awards season haul of continued focus on this descent into biofiction miserabilism, complete with a sickly fabricated plot leading to Marilyn's death, but probable future therapy for herself as a result of the role. Many have played Marilyn Monroe in numerous tragic biopics, but never like this. Dominik uses de Armas' willingness to put her whole self, body and soul out there for his sadistic explorations, gussied up as prestige Netflix NC-17 rated play clicking. Rape, abortion, miscarriage, assault, abuse, and chronic belittling abound as we're made to helplessly endure his nearly 3-hour dissolution of a woman whom we all know is doomed. Dominik seems to be lording over his audience with a proclamation of, "Do you want to help her? You can't. Because no one would." Besides how excellent de Armas truly is in Blonde, there's another compliment that must be given. That is to cinematographer Joss Irvin. Irvin manages recreate the mood and feel of Monroe's world, but also of the shared experiences of her image. While he is Dominik's partner in crime in the director's Oliver Stone-esque untethered, baffling frequent shifts from different color and monotone palettes, film stocks, and aspect ratios, Irvin and his crew nail it where it matters most. For what it's worth, Blonde effectively transports us back in time. Why, then, the usually compelling musicians Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, who scored Dominik's sublime The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, 2007, opt for music that sounds like minimalist electronica, remains a mystery. Yes, Marilyn was found in the nude. If that's why you're coming to Blonde, you'll see it. That's where this whole sexualized morbidity this is heading. Chronic daddy issues punctuated by unfulfilling dalliances with John F. Kennedy, Charles Chaplin Jr., and Edward G. Robinson Jr. Her and the two juniors share a kind of Jules E.T. Jim relationship, as well as bad marriages to Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller, Bobby Cannavale and Adrien Brody, credited respectively as the ex-athlete and the playwright, usher her to Dominik's take on her immortal mortality. As a warped #MeToo tragedy, it fails to take us inside Norma Jean Mortensen, i.e. Norma Jean Baker, in any meaningful, illuminating way. Instead, we're plunged into an interminable, arm's-length inferno fueled by ongoing hardship-mongering and catastrophe gazing. Andrew Dominik is both better than this and now, added to the list of untrustworthy directors until further notice. Anna, Marilyn, Norma Jean. I don't know who among you can hear this or needs to at this point, but we love you. In her New York Times pen of Norman Mailer's 1973 biography of Marilyn Monroe, the critic Pauline Kael wrote, "I wish they'd let her die." I had much the same thought after watching Blonde, which focuses so narrowly on Monroe's pain and trauma that it feels less like a biographical drama than a passion play. The movie turns Monroe into an avatar of suffering, brought low by a miserable childhood, a father she never knew, and an industry full of men who abused and exploited her until her death in 1962, at the age of 36. There's truth to that story, of course, but it's hardly the only truth that can be drawn from Monroe's tough life and extraordinary career. It's also an awfully tedious note to keep hitting for nearly 3 hours. For all that, I came away from Blonde with great admiration for Ana de Armas and her commitment to the role of Norma Jean Baker, the woman who would become known all over the world as Marilyn Monroe. I felt even more admiration for Joyce Carol Oates' novel, which freely reshapes and reinvents details from Monroe's life, but offers a much more nuanced and expansive view of its subject than the writer-director Andrew Dominik manages. The movie feels off from the start as it whisks us through Norma Jean's difficult upbringing in 1930s Los Angeles. We meet her volatile mother, Gladys, a fierce Julianne Nicholson who's diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and institutionalized when Norma Jean is still a child. Blonde skips over a lot of details, including Norma Jean's time in foster care and her first marriage, and fast-forwards to her experience as a pin-up model, which leads to her start in motion pictures. De Armas' transformation into Monroe goes well beyond a breathy whisper and a peroxide dye job. She plays up Norma Jean's kindness and her naive, unassuming nature. That leaves her ill-prepared for an industry that degrades her from the get-go, starting with the Hollywood mogul who rapes her in his office at their first meeting. Everyone she works with is condescending to her, even though she's much harder working and more intellectually curious about her material than anyone gives her credit for. She also maintains ties with her mother, visiting her in the hospital and asking about the identity of her father, who, she's been led to believe, was a famous Hollywood actor himself. According to Blonde, Norma Jean's persistent daddy issues are to blame for her string of bad romances, starting with a bizarre and wholly fictional threesome with two hunky Hollywood descendants, Charlie Chaplin Jr. and Edward G. Robinson Jr. And then there are her famously ill-fated marriages to Joe DiMaggio, played by Bobby Cannavale, and Arthur Miller, played by Adrien Brody. Along the way, she has multiple pregnancies, and there are graphic depictions of Norma Jean having an abortion and, later, a miscarriage. Blonde suggests that Monroe desperately wanted a child, to become the loving, supportive mother she herself never had. But it depicts this desire in a way that's frankly ridiculous. The movie keeps flashing back to close-ups of a fetus in Norma Jean's womb, shimmering like the Star Child from 2001. Dominik has always been an artful filmmaker, and Blonde is full of lustrous images, shot in a mix of color and black and white, that sometimes beautifully evoke vintage Monroe photographs. And it has brooding music by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, who also scored the director's great 2007 western, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Like that film, Blonde feels like a slow-motion death march. It's the assassination of Marilyn Monroe by basically everyone she ever met. There are fleeting moments of joy and lightness along the way, especially when Armas reenacts bits of Monroe's famous performances in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot. But even when Dominik recreates these classic Hollywood moments, he's quick to cancel out our pleasure. Even the famous subway grate sequence from The 7-Year Itch has to be stretched into a crushing lament for how endlessly brutalized this woman was. Blonde clearly wants us to feel for Norma Jean, but it dwells on her pain so obsessively, never more so than when she's shown being sexually assaulted by President Kennedy, that the movie's empathy feels like another form of exploitation. Marilyn Monroe may have been a glossy Hollywood construct, one that Norma Jean herself had a hand in creating. But Blonde is too thuddingly repetitive and finally, unimaginative to bring us any closer to understanding the woman behind that construct. It left me feeling that Monroe deserved better, not just from the industry that chewed her up and spat her out, but from any filmmaker hoping to make sense of her legacy. The woefully inaccurate but stunningly beautiful Blonde, 2022, managed to spark controversy for its discourse. However, a good portion of the criticism seems to be much ado about nothing. Thus, with a fine-toothed comb and a magnifying glass, senior writer Fabian Garcia breaks down what Blonde is really trying to say, with maybe a few bumps along the way. The second attempt at adapting Joyce Carol Oates' 2000 novel Blonde comes in the form of Netflix's newest original movie of the same name. Already making headlines for its rare NC-17 rating, the high-profile release was further underscored by public response toward the subject matter of the film and the nature of the main subject's adaptation on screen. Despite this, those involved with the film maintain that their portrayal of Marilyn Monroe, Ana de Armas, is a work of fiction, nothing more. Is it possible that the borrowed name from the Hallmark film actress is really meant to act as a vessel for what is potentially a deeper narrative about Hollywood and the concept of the actor itself? Is it equally possible that the long journey to get to those arguments is riddled with blunders more common than one would prefer? Yes, all of the above. Blonde has nothing to hide. It always reveals its hand right before it begins to play, insistent on telegraphing exactly what the character on screen is feeling, whether it's through unfathomable camera tricks or not so subtle visual metaphors. Aspect ratios bend and flex liberally and palettes switch from technicolor to monochrome at the drop of a hat. As Monroe feels trapped in her spiral of vitriol and exploitation, suddenly the frame tightens around her face, and the aspect ratio boxes itself in, the grayscale photography emphasizing the poignant shadows cast across her face. A long shot presents a ravenous theater applauding the screen before them, Monroe center stage, the frame outstretched as wide as possible in full and glorious color. While these are basic conventions and used accordingly, they're often broad strokes when compared to the minutiae of what's really happening. The most prominent dilemma that blonde faces is the sheer fact that there are only so many ways to communicate the same feeling, the same emotion, without teetering into territory that feels gratuitous and grotesque. Writer and director Andrew Dominik's remedy for this issue is bloating the film full of pretty images and cutting-edge cinematography in order to maintain a consistent aesthetic language, an antibiotic to a contagious superbug. Against all odds, Blonde makes it possible to prove a point a little too well. A rather moot point at that. Cinematographer Joss Irvin has worked on many music videos and music films in the past, including Beyoncé's Lemonade film and Sampha's Process short, and it would appear he's taken a lot of those sensibilities and applied them to Blonde in an overt fashion. There's a noticeable amount of care put into crafting the world of Blonde, with each scene deftly created to look as gorgeous as humanly possible. A new gimmick is constantly being applied in order to communicate some underlying mood, much like you would see in a high-budget music video. A SnowRiCam rig is used to communicate emotional distress in two different scenes. A well-positioned mirror shot features Norma Jean begging Monroe to come back right before a dramatic shift occurs between the sobbing face of Norma Jean and sunny disposition of Monroe. A hazy filter and shallow lens is applied to Monroe right before her abortion to visually express her absentia. The obvious nods to the ever-surrealist tendencies of David Lynch are a clever homage but an equally pale imitation. The film relies so heavily on visuals alone to convey what are, in all honesty, very straightforward sentiments. It's not an inherently obnoxious thing, but rather a moment that is never properly seized. To reiterate, if graded on looks alone, Blonde would stand in a league of its own, but unfortunately, that isn't the case here. There are serious ramifications for leaving the more profound concepts to be spoon-fed to the audience in ham-fisted ways. The writing too often suffers from appearing properly disingenuous. Monroe whispers to her aborted fetus about her lapsed pregnancy in a scene that feels uncharacteristically supernatural. She habitually struggles to meet the demands of men she seeks validation from due to an absent father figure. She feels the need to prove her worth either sexually or intellectually to her face-warped fans. There's an evident lack of subtlety and nuance in articulating these notions, which in some cases comes across as if Dominik thinks the audience is too stupid to understand what's really going on. In addition, not much is done to flesh out the abuse the film capitalizes on. There is no catharsis to this apparent idée fixe Blonde has with mistreatment. We watch her become victimized, we can see things aren't right, and we can empathize with what's happening to her, but nothing more is being said or mediated. In its near 3-hour runtime, the message it carries can be diminished to a few sentences, let alone the 1,000 words a picture deserves. With all that said, is it fair to say these flaws come across as disrespectful? Well, the answer isn't all that simple. Marilyn Monroe is treated as a character, and Norma Jean properly follows suit. Yet, the majority has found that this route has somehow bastardized the person it's based on, even though it's ironically not any different from what the public has already done to Norma Jean Baker as a person. Above all else, the film contends the fact that a narrative has already attached itself to Norma Jean whether we like it or not. What the film seeks to do is blur that line further. Dominik alleges we will never truly know who Marilyn Monroe is, or was, nor do we really deserve to. In contrast to the various themes of the film, nothing substantial about Monroe's actual life or career is explicitly revealed to the viewer. Blonde assumes you already know everything about her, but in reality, we're only getting snapshots of the famous star, recognizable pieces everyone is bound to associate and identify with. It opts to recontextualize those moments in a new light, unlike a real biopic which would present them as a definitive fact. Watching Blonde play out is like looking at those photos you'd see of Marilyn Monroe on mood boards or 50s-themed diners and creating the story around them, tracing the line that eventually fell to the hands of fate. In this case, the film excels at using these references. However, much like its other subtleties, or lack thereof, they don't always land quite how they're intended to. It's not easy to identify with someone based on iconography alone. Although, to Armas's credit, she does sell the look and feel of Marilyn Monroe to an uncanny degree, enough to where those moments of weakness could continue to suspend your disbelief. For what it's worth, Blonde doesn't seem concerned with being an ultra-realistic, true-to-form biopic about the convoluted life of Marilyn Monroe. It also doesn't seem interested in being a neo-feminist condemnation of Hollywood and the abuse actresses suffered during this period, nor does it really need to be. Instead, we have a hyper-stylized portrait of psychosis, the drama of a Hollywood star misunderstood, misappropriated, and minimized. It's far more content with being a metaphor of itself. Monroe laments that all movies do is cut, 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 and in practice that does typically seem to be the case for Blonde. In most circumstances, Monroe's pain feels like a spectacle, which does make it easy to interpret the film as exploitative and borderline disrespectful. However, that narrative can't help but feel a little cut and dry beside the unmistakable polish applied to so much of the film. Much like David Fincher in his 2020 feature Mank, Dominik had the impossible task of recreating 1950s Hollywood in the modern day. It's a feat easier said than done and was achieved almost flawlessly. It's hard to deny Armas' compelling ability to channel Monroe. She isn't a carbon copy, but instead captures the essence of a timeless movie star, and you can't help but feel like you're watching her grace the silver screen once again. The plethora of breathtaking shots throughout the film looks almost one of a kind, if not a bit intoxicating. Distilling the work to a meek sexploitation film is grossly dismissive. Blonde goes way above the call of duty but manages to miss a few of its marks, each of which varies in significance. Did the world of cinema really need this depiction of Marilyn Monroe as a helpless victim? Are we really just adding to the noise? Not necessarily. Not unlike how Norma Jean is trapped in Blonde, the real-life Norma Jean is forever confined to the collective memory of society, the pinnacle sex symbol of Hollywood's golden age, known for playing a dumb blonde, despite never actually being either of those things. In an all-too-cruel and common twist, the fact of the matter is, even real life can be inaccurate. Andrew Dominik's adaptation of Joyce Carol Oates' novel, Blonde, often tethers the thin line of provocation and exploitation to a fault. However, when the film erupts into surrealistic Lynchian territory, particularly Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire, it tells a fictitious tale of one of Hollywood's biggest icons. It intertwines fiction and reality, dreams and nightmares equally horrifying, devastating, and hypnotizing, exploring trauma, objectification, self-destruction, loneliness, and desolation through visually poetic and lugubrious vignettes, a lengthy almost 3-hour canvas, and a tour de force performance by Ana de Armas. After fighting to do it for almost a decade, Andrew Dominik finally managed to make his film adaptation of Joyce Carol Oates' critically renowned 775-page novel, Blonde, which is also loathed by plenty of people. This is also Dominik's first feature film in a long while. This is not counting his 2 excellent documentaries with Nick Cave and his The Bad Seeds companion, One More Time with Feeling and This Much I Know to Be Trues with Warren Ellis. In the novel, Joyce Carol Oates tells a fictionalized tale of one of Hollywood's biggest icons, drawing on literary traditions of fairy tales and Gothic novels to conjure it. She was obsessed with the mystery behind Monroe's life, what was true and what wasn't. Dozens of biographers have disagreed with the basic facts of the bombshell's life. There's a myth behind the person you saw on screen, Marilyn, the goddess, and the one nobody saw, her off-screen persona, Norma Jean, the vulnerable, and her armor, Blonde, the symbol for the parable of the stainless existence of the upper class, the ideal image during that day and age. Therefore, Oates wrote out of intrigue and fascination. This fictional piece rearranges and invents details such as foster homes, screen performances, medical predicaments, and relationships of Monroe's life. It seeks a deeper poetic and spiritual truth to the tragic reality of a celebrated and desired star. Then comes Dominik, who is a brilliant filmmaker in my book. His style and panache are often brutal, his features primarily focus on masculinity and the falling apart of male friendships. Yet, at their core, those films are tragedies. Blood is spilled while characters live and later die, one way or another, by their natures, appetites, longings, and fervor. And we see specks of his pet themes in his latest feature, Blonde. However, one thing is for sure, it's a tragedy, a fictitious myth of self-destruction, despondency, desolation, agony, and objectification told through a long-winded canvas of almost 3 hours, and an astonishing dual performance by Ana de Armas in its lead role. There's no other definition for Blonde. It's not a biopic, it's a story of sheer cataclysm. From the beginning, it portrays the lights and allure of the big screen spotlight in black and white. It creates an image that will remain in your head throughout the film's entirety as it represents turmoil amidst ascent-ins. Dreamy in its aesthetics, while nightmarish in its development, Dominik tells Joyce Carol Oates' personification of Norma Jean's story by way of disjointed vignettes with a surrealistic aftertaste that recounts her life from her childhood, with her mentally unstable mother, to her tragic death, as she ascends to fame and descends into the inferno. Dominik's filmography focuses more on poetry rather than prose or grace, hence its cruel demeanor at its most tragic moments. Blonde is a challenging film to go through, one that is rigorous and unforgiving. It is a film that often tethers the thin line between provocation and exploitation to a significant fault. It's a conveyor belt of tragic moments tied to one another, presenting almost as if devoid of hope. Blonde nearly reaches a trauma-porn state due to its extensive reliance on tragic events with scenes of sexual abuse and excessive nudity that will have plenty of people crawling for the exits. This is the film's biggest problem. Nevertheless, what keeps it from not reaching that position is the poetic nature of Oates' storytelling mechanisms. And this is combined with Dominik's pitch black, without elegance, destructive style. This makes the viewing experience feel like going through a meat grinder. It lingers through suffering as fiction and reality, dreams, and nightmares are rearranged. But where does dreaming end and madness begin? In Dominik's Blonde, dreams don't last long. They are destroyed by tragic experiences that deteriorate Norma's self but thicken Marilyn's skin. Madness, however, is always present. Blonde's introduction is fueled by a fire in the Hollywood sign, signaling an entrance to hell. Even Norma's mother, played by Julianne Nicholson, comments that she wants to see hell closer, despite being forced to go back. This forces the narrative to tell its woeful tale to the audience vigorously. It's demanding, in its full definition of the word, but Dominik and Armas fully control their craft. All of Dominik's films partake in the Australian director's own style. Yet, in his latest, he adopts the techniques of a master at the craft to tell the story of dual natures, the malicious underbellies of the Hollywood zeitgeist, and maintaining a kind heart when everything is coming down to a tragic end. David Lynch's, particularly his work in Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire. From the electricity and flickering of the light bulbs to the hand sign on the alley pointing to the stage door, similar to the fable-turned-reality told to Laura Dern's character in Inland Empire. The constant telephone ringing, as seen in Lynch's short film series, Rabbits, Dominik creates an expressionistic and lyrical Lynchian picture to portray the duality of a woman. This shadow possesses Norma, along with her crown, blonde hair, and the vessel, the body trapped in a glass cage. This is Marilyn Monroe, interpreted as Laura Palmer. All Norma wants is for her to be loved and appreciated beyond the specter that's possessing her, the wraith that created the flawless illusion of the Hollywood starlet. You're going to imagine that next to your own real body is the imaginary body of your own character, whom you've created with your mind. These are the words that Norma uses to cast the spell for the deceptive possession. The fame and glory are there. However, the rest is a curse of its own that constantly breaks her heart and ours watching. There are occasions in which Norma accepts the help of the wraith, confining it as a shield of armor. However, the audience notices that it is a prison in which she's residing. Even though she's beginning to witness that the persona she's created is a prison, Norma searches for it. One of the most heartbreaking scenes in the film revolves around her makeup artist, Whitey, Toby Huss, putting on the makeup that transforms her into a platinum blonde actress while repeating the words, "She's coming. She's almost here." And then, she looks into the mirror and sees the persona taking over for one last time. Norma's being drained by her own creation, a phenomenon of poisoning and self-destruction. Isn't all love based on delusion? Marilyn's mind is blurred by the Shining-esque amnesia that doesn't let her see reality anymore. The only thing she can see is the glamour and the spotlight paving her way into self-annihilation, manipulated by the higher ups who never cared for her, seeing her as a commodity to fulfill others' fantasies. Again, it is utterly devastating to see how each event in her life transpires. They end in heartache and with a lingering sensation of impending doom. It is all captured beautifully and sonically by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis' magnificent and haunting score. This is especially when they use the Ellis howling in the Bad Seeds track off their album Ghostine, Bright Horse. Dominik delivers almost 3 hours of provocation and psychedelic yet haunting poetry through various artistic distinctions. There are aspect ratio changes, changes in color schemes, and the glossiness of its production that transport the viewer into the story's nightmarish and shapeless period. Blonde doesn't capture reality nor the real Marilyn Monroe's life, it showcases Joyce Carol Oates' version of said icon. That doesn't excuse the ickiness of its synchronous exploitation. There are other ways to explore the objectification and mistreatment that Norma/Marilyn went through during her career than showing plenty of unpleasant scenes. Nevertheless, Dominik's focus is on elevating the film's aspect of distorting reality. Plenty of beautifully captured scenes showcase such distortion. A bed becomes the Niagara Falls, crowds chanting Marilyn's name get extended, grotesque mouths, vomit is projected onto the camera, among others. Blonde is daring, equally horrifying, and hypnotizing in its storytelling by drifting from scene to scene dreamily and viscerally. I can see why people hate it, to their point, it is too cruel to bear at times and shocking, to say the least. However, I was utterly engaged with Dominik's directorial heft and Armas' powerhouse performance. Like in The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2007, Dominik demands a lot of the audience. This is true of both its narrative structure, canvas, and appearance. Some will follow, others won't. And there's an understanding to both sides, the ones who love it and deem it a masterpiece or the others who detest it to a great extent. Personally, I found myself liking the picture. However, I still have my drawbacks regarding some narrative decisions and its frequent tightrope walk between provocation and maltreatment. The Lynchian haze covers its looks, gorgeously shot by cinematographer Joss Irvin. It haunts its sounds, lights buzzing, glass breaking, white noise crackling, cameras flashing. It puts the audience in a Twilight Zone-esque state for almost 3 hours, where you can't escape or tune off. Cinematic ventures like these aren't often experienced nor presented in such a vast form. There is a scene that involves Adrien Brody's Arthur Miller and Armas's Norma, which brought me back to the poem in Charlie Kaufman's I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Bone Dog. Of course, there's no cinematic correlation with one another, but somehow, that poem emerged as I watched Dominik's Blonde. I kept thinking about the line, "You sigh into the onslaught of identical days." The dictation of endless suffering caused by broken personas and possessions causes one to feel trapped in an endless cycle of despair. As the days go by, blurring into one another, Norma/Marilyn doesn't change on the outside, yet they deteriorate on the inside. Blonde is difficult to sit through because of its runtime and the themes and imagery being tackled and shown. It constantly weaves intense scenes of sheer suffering with collage-esque frames of reenactments, whether of Marilyn's iconic pictures or photographs, and lines of contemplation. How desolate and stinging must it feel to be the epitome of the American Hollywood myth. She's adored by many as they chant her name, though she never truly felt the impact of love. Watched by millions, though nobody ever got a chance to see the real her, only the presence captured by the spotlight and big screens. By the time the end credits roll, you will be left puzzled for a good reason. What you have seen will remain in your mind for a long while. You won't be eager to watch it again. Yet, you would like to discuss it. Blonde will be a divisive picture. Ambivalence will see its day upon release, more so than in Albert Serra's Liberté, which also disturbed audiences across the world, while I remained entranced by what the Spanish filmmaker concocted. Many will fall onto the two-side argument of loath and love, while others won't even bother to engage with it. Still, somehow, that makes the film even more interesting. Just like the autobiographers of Marilyn's life debating each other over the simple facts, this movie will raise conversations between all watching regarding Blonde's true nature and the layers of the story's depiction of trauma. Today in my blog, I want to talk to you guys about the brand new Netflix original psychological drama film called Blonde. Blonde is written and directed by Dominik as the stars Ana de Armas in the lead role. This film's about a fictional chronicle of the inner life of Marilyn Monroe. Blonde is a brand new fictionalized Marilyn Monroe biopic that just hit Netflix past month. I am excited to talk about this one in particular because I have a lot to say about it like everybody else on the internet, and everybody is so mixed about the movie. Coming into this film, I was ecstatic to check this movie out as this was my #1 most anticipated film of September. As I have been here and so many talks about this movie and the fact that it got an NC-17 rating and Ana de Armas just looks fantastic in the movie. I wanted to watch this movie and see what I thought of it for myself. So, I checked it out the other night and I gotta say that I am straight down the middle on this film. Unfortunately, there are so many aspects of this movie that could have been so great and well put together in another Marilyn Monroe movie. But how much of that was just exploiting Marilyn Monroe and the violent things that she experienced just for the sake of this fictionalized tale of her life? Let's just dive into some positives first because I do have a few positives here. I have to start with Ana de Armas playing Marilyn Monroe is excellent in this movie. As I totally lost her in this performance and I really think she should be nominated at the Oscars, but she probably won't because of the mixed reception of this film. I also found the cinematography and the directing to be really strong here as all the colors just match every single time that this movie jumps. I also love the framing of each shot that felt so detailed and dedicated, and all the transition shots are very well executed. Sometimes the transition from one scene right into the next scene is so fluently that I had no idea how they were able to do it. I also found the production design and costume design to be effective here as I truly thought that these characters were in the time that they should be. The Blonde movie was able to create that magical immersion of being in this world due to the costumes just being so accurate to the time and having the production design be so great and grand and having great visual effects. The first one has got to be how pretentious this movie is. I'm not the type of critic who likes to call out filmmakers for being pretentious, as I think it's a word that is thrown around way too often from movies that are just really well made and trying to be artistically creative. The biggest negative I can give this movie has got to be the screenplay and the story, because this is a fictionalized version of Marilyn Monroe, as it is based on a 2000 novel, and I know this movie is trying to adapt that novel. I don't know much about the novel. I've never read it. I don't feel like we ever get a lot of her character and her arc in this movie, and we all know that she lived a very short-lived tragedy of life, but when your whole movie is just focused on it, especially when the film is around 2 hours and 45 minutes, it does make this movie just feel like a complete drag, and it just was so uncomfortable that I just didn't want to watch the movie anymore. Overall, Blonde was a very disappointing film that has terrific filmmaking and a phenomenal performance by Ana de Armas. But with the story and the screenplay and the pretentiousness just filling this movie and exploiting Marilyn Monroe, I cannot recommend this movie unless you're interested in checking it out because of Ana de Armas. How should we assess writer-director Dominik's adaptation of Joyce Carol Oates's historical fiction novel about the inner life of Marilyn Monroe? Some have viewed it as a biopic and judged it accordingly, worrying about its lack of fidelity to the known details of Monroe's life, and attempting to evaluate how accurately or fairly it presents her strengths and weaknesses, on and off screen. Others have interpreted it as a more expressionist portrayal of the gap between private and public personae, a generic peep at the tears behind the smiling mask of celebrity. Yet at its heart this is a gothic melodrama, a fever dream of childhood trauma haunting adult life, replete with skin-crawlingly cruel visions of inquisitorial torture, brutal ordeals, and hellish infernos, more Nightmare on Elm Street than My Week with Marilyn. Cuban actor Ana de Armas, who proved a scene-stealing presence in films such as Knives Out and No Time to Die, is simply extraordinary as Norma Jean Baker, an aspiring performer for whom the specter of Marilyn Monroe is an assumed identity, a portal to stardom. Her past is full of monsters, a mother, a mesmerizing Julianne Nicholson, who drives her into raging fires and attempts to drown her in a scalding bath, and an unknown father from whom she receives creepily controlling ghostly missives. Juggling past and present, Dominik intercuts childhood fears with grown-up tears as she encounters monstrous studio heads. An early audition leads to rape, violent husbands, Bobby Cannavale's Joe DiMaggio beats her when pin-up photos fire his jealousy, and loveless lovers, an assignation with JFK will make you gag. Worse still are the grotesque intrauterine visions of doctors that owe a debt to the demonic delirium of Rosemary's Baby. Roman Polanski's repulsion also casts a long shadow, or to the abortive abortion scene from David Cronenberg's The Fly crossed with the imagined unborn baby talk of Alice Lowe's antenatal slasher Previous Eng. In many ways, Blonde is a shrieking sister picture to the altogether gentler The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. In that masterful 2007 study of stardom, Brad Pitt's antihero is killed by a creep who has idolized him since childhood. In Blonde, we find that near mythological celebrity not only masks personal loss, but also draws destruction upon itself. It's a deal made with the devil, encapsulated most acutely in a scene in which a distraught Norma Jean waits desperately for the spirit of Marilyn to possess her, a transformation chillingly played out in her dressing table mirror as her tears turn to a familiar megawatt smile. It's a smile that reminded me of Cheryl Lee in David Lynch's Twin Peaks, Fire Walk With Me, where Laura Palmer's homecoming queen visage is fleetingly replaced with that of a screaming demon. If The Assassination of Jesse James was a film about fame dressed as a western, then Blonde is a horror movie masquerading as a film about fame. Shifting back and forth from monochrome to color in ever-changing screen sizes, Blonde draws heavily on iconic images of its subject in the same way that Baz Luhrmann's Elvis seemed to breathe life into familiar still pictures. There's something genuinely uncanny about the way Dominik places de Armas in Monroe's shoes, reproducing well-rehearsed movie scenes in a manner that sometimes left me wondering whether this was archive or invention, memory or make-believe. Critics will claim, justifiably, that Blonde portrays Monroe as having no agency in this victimized life story, or that the movie fails to give her credit for the comedic panache she demonstrated in hits such as Some Like It Hot. Tonally, Blonde is closer to the overheated psychosis of 1952's Don't Bother to Knock. It's true that humor is in short supply, reduced to blackly comic gags about Kennedy watching rockets blast off while being dutifully fellated. Yet despite its note-perfect evocation of moments from Monroe's life, I would argue that in the end Blonde isn't really about Marilyn at all. It just happens to be wearing her wardrobe. Underpinning it all is another gloriously evocative score from Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, a melancholy symphony of ambient electronica and eerie voices, interspersed with tinkling acoustic themes that sprinkle a hint of tearful stardust glitter upon a sea of mournful tragedy and despair. This film, directed by Andrew Dominik, screenplay by Andrew Dominik, based on Blonde, produced by Brad Pitt, starring Ana de Armas, cinematography Joss Irvin, edited by Adam Robinson, music by Nick Cave, production company Plan B Entertainment, distributed by Netflix, release date September 8, 2022, running time 166 minutes, country United States, language English, budget $22 million. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends. and subscribe to the channel for more amazing movie stories. Thank you for watching.